talk about a quote-unquote genius, there's almost always this unspoken assumption that they just won some kind of genetic lottery.
Oh, absolutely. Like it's a given.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's treated like a superhero origin story. Like you either have the radioactive spider bite of extreme inaccessible intelligence, or you're just, well, a regular mortal.
It is a really comforting myth, honestly.
Right.
Because if genius is just an innate superpower, something you are literally just born with, then the rest of us don't actually have to try to replicate it. We can just sit in the audience and watch them perform.
Exactly. We let ourselves off the hook.
Yeah. But when you examine the actual lives of the people we slap that label on, the whole superhero narrative completely falls apart. You start to see like a landscape of daily habits, spectacular failures, and highly specific mindsets. And those are entirely accessible to anyone willing to put in the work.
Which is exactly why today's deep dive is so exciting. We are looking at a massive stack of sources today. A collection of personal letters, excerpts from Caltech lectures, autobiographical essays, and even some declassified government reports.
It's quite a stack.
It really is. And all of it is centered around one of the 20th century's most fascinating minds, Richard Feynman. And if you are listening to this right now, I really want to frame this for you.
Yeah, this is important.
We are not doing a dry historical biography today. We are pulling apart Feynman's life to extract a practical blueprint. This is really about how you can absorb complex information, avoid drowning in data, and, actually manufacture your own breakthroughs.
Because Feynman's background completely shatters that stereotype of the isolated, dusty academic. I mean, he won the 1965 Nobel Prize in Physics for his work on quantum electrodynamics.
Which is huge.
Massive.
Yeah.
And in his mid-20s, he was working on the Manhattan Project at Los Alamos, often as the youngest and definitely the most irreverent person in the room.
Yeah, irreverent is a good word for it.
But he was also like playing bongo drums in Pasadena strip clubs.
As you do when you're a Nobel laureate.
Right. And he was cracking high-security safes at Los Alamos, literally just to demonstrate the illusion of their security protocols to the military.
That is wild.
He even taught himself to draw portraits well enough to sell them under a pseudonym in art galleries.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because he sounds like that one impossibly irritating friend we all have.
One who's good at everything.
Yes, the one who can rebuild a car transmission from scratch, but also casually explain Renaissance art history over a beer. How do you even begin to emulate someone like that? Because the sources mention even as a kid, he was fixing his neighbor's radios.
He was, yeah.
But he wasn't doing it by, reading the instruction manuals or memorizing wiring diagrams. He was fixing them by reasoning from first principles.
And that radio example is really the perfect entry point into his mindset. Think about how a typical repairman works. They look at a radio, they recognize a broken part from a schematic, and they just swap it out.
Right, standard procedure.
But young Feynman didn't know the schematics. He would turn the radio on, listen to the symptoms say, like a static hum that only started after the radio had been on for 10 minutes, and he would just sit and think.
Just staring at it.
Yeah. He reasoned that something was heating up. And a vacuum tube, well, as it gets hot, it expands. So if it expands, maybe a loose connection inside is shifting. He was tracing the actual physical reality of the electricity and the heat rather than just following some prescribed flowchart.
So he wasn't relying on intelligence as a database of facts. He was relying on pure, unadulterated curiosity about the physical world.
Exactly. He famously referred to his core motivation as the pleasure of finding things out.
The pleasure of finding things out. I love that.
It wasn't the pleasure of being the smartest person in the room or the pleasure of being proven right. It was the thrill of confronting something he didn't understand and then wrestling with it until he did.
And the autobiographical sources trace that exact instinct all the way back to his childhood. Specifically to these walks he would take in the woods with his father, Melville.
Yes, Melville is such a key figure here.
He really is. And Melville was a uniform salesman, right? He had no scientific background at all. But he taught his son this profound lesson about the illusion of knowledge.
The bird story.
The bird story. Yeah. So Melville pointed out a bird, and he told his son that you could know the exact name of that bird in every single language on Earth. Like you could know it's a brown-throated thrush in English or whatever the word is in Portuguese or Chinese.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you would know absolutely nothing about the bird itself.
What's fascinating here is the distinction Melville was making between labeling and observing. Knowing the name of the bird is just memorizing a human convention.
Yeah, a label we just made up.
Precisely.
Yeah.
To actually know the bird, you have to observe its mechanisms. Why does it peck at its feathers? How does it navigate? What is its relationship to the environment? Feynman carried this entire philosophy into his physics. He fundamentally believed that naming is often the enemy of true understanding.
I mean, I look at the reality of modern work in education, and it seems like we have built our entire society around the exact opposite idea.
Oh, completely.
In our world today, we literally use naming things as our primary metric for competence. We memorize flashcards for standardized tests. We drop the right corporate buzzwords in a meeting to sound strategic, synergy, paradigm shift, leveraging assets.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like we are actively training ourselves out of true understanding. Are we doing that?
We really are, because when you chase the vocabulary of a field, you get this false sense of closure. You learn the buzzword, your brain registers a hit of dopamine, and it says, okay, I know this.
Box checked. Move on.
Right. And the inquiry stops dead.
Mm.
Feynman argued that if you convince yourself that naming something means you understand it, you become incredibly vulnerable to being wrong without even realizing it.
Wow.
Chasing credentials stops the inquiry process. Chasing questions is what fuels it. You have to actively strip away the jargon to see what is underneath.
But, okay, if you successfully strip away the jargon and you start trying to observe the underlying reality, a new problem pops up.
Which is?
How do you verify your own understanding? Because if you aren't using the approved vocabulary to test yourself, you could easily just be spinning a different kind of fiction. You might just be fooling yourself.
That is exactly where we see the development of what is now famously known as the Feynman technique.
Right, the Feynman technique.
When he was a graduate student at Princeton, he basically created a physical mechanism to prevent himself from falling into that trap of false knowledge. He kept a specific notebook, and he labeled the cover. Notebook of things I don't know about.
I just love the humility of that.
Yeah.
It's not a notebook of his brilliant world-changing theories. It's a dedicated map of his own ignorance.
And he used it constantly.
Right.
Whenever he encountered a concept he couldn't fully map out, he forced himself to explain it on the page using the simplest possible language.
Just stripping it all down.
Exactly. The diagnostic test he developed is brutal, but so effective. He asked, "Can you explain this complex concept to a 12-year-old? And not in a patronizing way, but using fundamental foundational concepts."
So I'm trying to visualize this in practice. Like, if I'm trying to explain something like blockchain or, I don't know, even just how a carburetor works in a car.
Sure.
If I get stuck and I have to reach for a phrase like cryptographic hash function,
Yeah.
my explanation has failed.
Yes.
It's basically like trying to build a piece of IKEA furniture without the manual. If I finish and I have a bunch of complicated leftover pieces that I don't know what to do with, which in this case is the jargon, it means the core structure is completely unstable. The jargon is just extra parts masking the fact that I didn't put the core concept together correctly.
That structural analogy is actually spot on. If you look at how academia or even corporate management operates, jargon is so frequently deployed as a deliberate gatekeeping tool.
Oh, for sure. To sound smart.
Right. It's meant to create an exclusive club and keep other people out.
Right.
But Feynman proved throughout his entire career that clarity of thought and clarity of language are identical.
They are the exact same thing.
Yes. If you cannot say it simply, you are not thinking it clearly. This is why his introductory physics lectures at Caltech became so legendary. He was translating the most mind-bending concepts of quantum mechanics to first-year students, relying entirely on clear analogies and everyday language.
He made the universe feel inviting rather than intimidating.
Exactly.
Which forces a very uncomfortable realization. Because what happens when you attempt that 12-year-old test and you realize your explanation is completely broken? You're holding all those leftover jargon pieces.
You have to face the music.
You have to do the hardest thing for any intelligent, ambitious person to do. You have to admit defeat. You have to say, I don't know.
And that is a profound behavioral shift. There's this really fascinating piece of archival footage where an interviewer asks Feynman a relatively technical question about how magnets repel each other.
I've seen clips of this, yeah.
So Feynman pauses for a surprisingly long time. And instead of giving a polished, confusing answer full of physics terminology, he looks at the interviewer and essentially says, I'm not going to be able to give you an answer to that. Why? Because I don't know.
He just straight up admits it.
Yes. He recognized that any answer he gave would rely on deeper concepts of electromagnetic force that the interviewer didn't share. So rather than fake a satisfying answer to look smart, he embraced the reality of not knowing.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The guy with the literal Nobel Prize is completely at ease, looking clueless on national television.
Right.
Meanwhile, the rest of us, like the average person, we panic and start sweating if we are asked a question we don't know the answer to in a Tuesday morning status meeting.
Oh, you really do.
We will invent paragraphs of absolute nonsense just to avoid saying the words, I don't know.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
Feynman actually had a visceral hatred for that exact behavior.
Yeah.
He famously coined the term cargo cult science.
Oh, I've heard that phrase tossed around, but where does it actually come from?
It originates from an anthropological phenomenon in the South Pacific after World War II.
Okay.
So during the war, these isolated islands were used as military bases. The local population saw planes flying constantly, bringing massive amounts of cargo, food, supplies, equipment.
Right.
Then the war ends, the militaries leave, and obviously the planes stop coming.
Hmm.
Well, in an attempt to get the cargo to return, the islanders built mock runways.
Really?
Yeah. They built wooden control towers. They wore bamboo antennas on their heads, like headsets. They replicated the form of an airstrip perfectly, but they completely lacked the underlying mechanisms of aviation and global supply chains. So the planes never came.
Wow. So they were going through all the motions without understanding the physics behind it.
Exactly. And Feynman applied this to scientists, and really to any professional, who dresses up their work to look rigorous without doing the foundational, honest labor.
Ah, I see.
They use the confident-sounding language, they format the reports beautifully, but they are terrified of uncertainty. They cover up their ignorance. Feynman didn't just consider this bad practice. He saw it as a violation of reality.
That's a strong way to put it.
It is. His foundational rule was, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool.
Because our egos desperately want us to believe we are the smartest people in the room.
Always.
But sitting in that ignorance, refusing to fake it, it feels like it requires a massive amount of mental endurance. I mean, if you are constantly admitting you don't know things, how do you keep from just burning out or feeling totally inadequate?
That's the secret, though. You only burn out if you view not knowing as a failure.
Oh, interesting.
The sources reveal that Feynman did experience severe burnout, but it came from the exact opposite source, intense, high-stakes pressure.
After the Manhattan Project, right?
Yes. After his work on the atomic bomb, he took a position as a young professor at Cornell. He had just helped engineer a weapon of terrifying consequence. On top of that, his wife had recently passed away from tuberculosis.
Oh, man. That's incredibly heavy.
It was.
Yeah.
He was spiritually and intellectually empty. He would stare at physics equations, and they made him feel absolutely nothing. He was seriously considering quitting the field entirely.
The stakes had just gotten too high. Physics wasn't about the pleasure of finding things out anymore. It was about global destruction and academic expectations.
Exactly. And the mechanism that pulled him out of that depression is arguably the most surprising part of his entire life story.
What happened?
He was sitting in the Cornell cafeteria, completely unmotivated, when someone tossed a plate into the air, like a dinner plate.
Wait, a plate?
Yeah, just a plate. Feynman watched the plate fly. He noticed it had a blue medallion on it. As the plate wobbled, the medallion spun, and he noticed that the wobble was faster than the spin.
Just a completely random observation in a cafeteria.
Completely random. But for the first time in months, he felt a spark of curiosity. With no grant funding on the line, no urgent problem to solve, and zero pressure to publish, he decided to calculate the exact mathematical relationship between the wobble and the spin of that plate.
Just for fun?
Just for fun. He discovered the ratio was 2-to-1, and he spent weeks just playing with the classical mechanics of spinning objects.
Okay, but how does calculating a spinning cafeteria plate lead to a Nobel Prize in physics? That seems like a massive leap.
It is a massive leap, but it's entirely connected. Once he had the mathematical framework for the wobbling plate, he started thinking about how electrons spin in orbits. He took the playful equations he developed in the cafeteria and applied them to the behavior of subatomic particles using relativity.
No way.
Yes. The mathematical structures he developed, just for the sheer delight of it, became the direct foundation for his groundbreaking, Nobel-winning work in quantum electrodynamics.
That is incredible. So the premise here is that play is actually the soil that serious work grows in.
That's a great way to put it.
But look at our current culture. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We treat play and work as diametric opposites. Play is supposed to be the reward you get only after the productive work is finished.
Right.
We are obsessed with optimizing every single minute of our day for maximum output. Are we actively sabotaging our best breakthroughs because we're obsessed with being productive 100% of the time.
We absolutely are. Society tells us that play is frivolous, but Feynman proved that following pure delight is a highly effective scientific method.
Wow.
By removing the pressure of an outcome, the brain is free to notice patterns it would otherwise completely ignore. If you lose the ability to follow a question simply because it delights you, you lose the engine of your own intellectual growth.
But that same instinct, the relentless commitment to following the truth wherever it leads, whether it results in a playful discovery or something much heavier, it defined his most famous public act.
It really did.
Because following the physics of a spinning plate is delightful. But following the physics of a national tragedy is incredibly uncomfortable, especially when it challenges massive institutions.
This brings us to Feynman's role in the 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger investigation.
Right.
The space shuttle exploded shortly after liftoff, killing all 7 astronauts on board. NASA formed the Rogers Commission to investigate the disaster, and Feynman, who was actually dying of rare forms of cancer at the time, was asked to join.
Reading the documentation around the commission, there was this palpable sense that the institution wanted a clean, diplomatic conclusion.
Oh, absolutely.
They wanted to find a generic fault without pointing fingers or deeply disrupting NASA's public image or their funding.
But Feynman had zero interest in diplomacy. Through his own independent channels, completely bypassing the official briefings, he spoke directly to the engineers.
The people actually doing the work.
Yes. And he discovered that the solid rocket boosters relied on these rubber O-rings to seal the joints. The engineers had explicitly warned NASA management that in freezing temperatures, the rubber lost its elasticity. It would become hard and brittle.
And if it gets brittle, it doesn't expand fast enough when the rockets ignite. The hot gases escape through the joint, they hit the external fuel tank, and the entire ship explodes.
The mechanism was terrifyingly simple, and NASA management had ignored it to keep the launch schedule on track. The morning of the launch had been unusually cold.
So what did Feynman do?
Well, he didn't just write a strongly worded email or a dissenting memo. During the live televised hearing, he asked for a glass of ice water. He took a sample of the O-ring material, clamped it, and dropped it into the ice water right in front of the cameras.
He just did a science experiment on live TV.
Yes. He physically demonstrated that the material lost its resilience when cold. He forced the world and the commission to look at the undeniable physical reality. He refused to let PR overrule reality.
I mean, he stripped away the PR, he stripped away the bureaucratic jargon, and he put the raw physics on the table.
Now, this raises an important point, and we have to be balanced here. To maintain an objective view of the sources, we have to acknowledge that Feynman was not some flawless, mythological figure.
Right. He was human.
Very human. The biographies make it clear he could be intensely arrogant. He was famously dismissive of fields he deemed unscientific, and his personal life and attitudes toward women were complicated and often highly problematic.
Yeah, that's definitely in the sources.
But in his professional methodology, his relentless pursuit of objective truth remains vital. It forces us to ask, how often do our own institutions prioritize optics over evidence? True integrity requires stating the uncomfortable truth to powerful people when the physical evidence demands it.
He famously appended a minority report to the commission's findings, and it includes arguably his most powerful quote, "For a successful technology, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled."
Nature cannot be fooled.
You can spin the narrative all you want, but the physics are going to do what the physics are going to do. If you are ignoring reality to save face, you are ultimately going to fail.
Every single time.
All right, we have traversed a massive amount of ground today, pulling apart Feynman's mindset. For you listening, this isn't just history. This is your new toolkit for absorbing information.
It really is.
It starts with prioritizing pure curiosity over the appearance of intelligence. Don't settle for naming things. Observe how they actually work. When you think you understand something, test it by stripping away the jargon.
Your 12-year-old test.
Exactly. If you can't explain it simply, admit you don't know it. Say, "I don't know" out loud to protect yourself from cargo cult thinking. Give yourself permission to play with ideas without forcing a productive outcome. And finally, let reality overrule PR.
That framework can completely change how you interact with information.
Absolutely.
I want to leave the listener with a final thought to chew on, building on everything we've explored today.
Let's hear it.
We talked about Feynman's notebook of things I don't know about, which he used to map his own scientific gaps. Think about adapting that for your own life. What would happen if you kept a daily journal entirely dedicated to the things you realized you didn't understand today?
Oh, wow.
In a world that is obsessed with constantly projecting competence and showing off what we already know, how much faster would you learn if you relentlessly, purposely documented your own ignorance?
That is a phenomenal challenge, a notebook full of your own blind spots. Because if genius isn't a genetic lottery, then it is simply the willingness to sit with the things you don't know and the courage to slowly, playfully figure them out.
Well said.
Grab a notebook, try it out, and as always, keep asking the next question.